He was just a single dad trying to buy his daughter a pair of shoes she could be proud of. But when he met the seller in person, he had no idea the simple act of kindness he was about to show would put him on the radar of a lonely billionaire who was about to change his entire life. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from the light? In the old city library was a soft, hazy gold, the kind that seemed to be filtered through time itself. It clung to the dust motes, dancing in the sunbeams, and settled on the spines of forgotten books, like a warm blanket. Leo watched his daughter Maya from behind the tall circulation desk, her small form perched on a stool. In the children's section, a book. Open in her lap, she was a world away, lost in a story about dragons and forgotten kingdoms. Her brow furrowed in concentration, her worn-out sneakers dangling a few inches above the faded linoleum floor. Those shoes were the reason for the knot in Leo's chest. They had been a good pair, once sturdy and reliable. But weeks of playground adventures and rainy-day puddle jumping had taken their toll. The soles were peeling away like sunburnt skin, and a small hole had appeared near the right toe. A tiny mouth that seemed to mock him every time he saw it. Maya didn't complain. She never did. She'd simply taken a black marker and drawn a smiling face around the hole, telling him the shoe was now whispering secrets to her. But next week was the annual school future fair, where the kids dressed up as what they wanted to be when they grew up. Maya wanted to be an explorer. She had a khaki vest she'd found at a thrift store and a pair of plastic binoculars, but the outfit wasn't complete without a sturdy pair of boots, shoes that looked like they could climb mountains and cross deserts, not whisper secrets. Through a hole, Leo ran a hand through his hair. The familiar scent of old paper and binding glue clinging to his fingers. He glanced at the ledger on his desk. The numbers staring back at him were unforgiving. The library paid him just enough to keep the lights on and the fridge from being completely empty. It was a job he loved. A quiet, noble profession of mending what was broken, of preserving stories, but it didn't pay for new shoes, not the kind a little explorer deserved. He had $87 in his bank account. $87. That had to stretch until his next paycheck, a thin thread pulled taut over a chasm of bills and rent and the ever-present need for groceries. He spent the last 3 nights scrolling through online marketplaces, searching for a miracle, a pair of gently used hiking boots in Maya's size that didn't cost a fortune, and then last night he'd found them a pair of dark brown leather boots, barely worn, the soles still thick with tread, the laces still stiff with newness. The seller's asking price was $20. $20? That felt like $200. He stared at the picture for a long time. The boots were perfect. They were everything Maya would want, everything he couldn't afford to buy. New. He messaged the seller, his fingers hesitating over the keyboard, and arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown the next afternoon. Now, as he watched Maya turn a page, her face lit with wonder. He felt a familiar mix of love and failure that was the constant weather of his life as a single father. A fierce, burning love for the little girl who was his entire world, and the cold, creeping fear that he would never be enough to give her the one she deserved. The $20 bill was crisp and folded neatly in Leo's wallet, a small, solitary soldier waiting for its mission. He'd earned it yesterday by staying late to rebind an old collection of poetry. For a university professor, a side job that paid in cash and a lingering feeling of satisfaction, the money was supposed to go toward the electric bill, which was already a week overdue. But the image of Maya's proscent face when she saw the boots was a stronger pull than the threat of a final notice. He'd figure it out, he always did. Maya sat beside him on the bus, her nose pressed to the window, her breath fogging the glass in a small, perfect circle. She was chattering about the book. She'd finished a story about a girl who could talk to trees. Leo listened, his gaze soft, but his mind was elsewhere, on the meeting, on the $20, on the hope that the boots were as good as they looked in the picture. The coffee shop the seller had suggested was called The Daily Grind, but there was nothing grinding about it. It was a sleek, modern space with polished concrete floors, minimalist wooden tables, and the quiet hiss of an espresso machine that looked more like a science experiment than a coffee maker. The air smelled of roasted beans and something faintly sweet, like almond syrup. It was the kind of place where people typed on laptops with glowing logos and wore jackets without frayed cuffs. Leo felt instantly out of place. His worn work coat and faded jeans felt too loud in the quiet hum of productivity. He held Maya's hand a little tighter. As they found a small table near the back, a few minutes later, a woman walked in. She paused near the entrance, her eyes scanning the room. She was tall, dressed in a simple but elegant black coat and dark jeans. Her hair was pulled back into a loose knot, and she wore no makeup, just a natural, quiet confidence. She wasn't what he'd expected. The seller's username, Julie7, had conjured an image of a harried mom from the suburbs, not this poised, collected woman, who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. She spotted him, and her expression softened into a small, polite smile. She walked over her boots, making a soft sound against the floor. Leo stood instinctively. "Julie?" he asked. She nodded. "You must be Leo. And this is my co-pilot Maya," he said, gesturing to his daughter, who gave a shy wave from her seat. Julie unagilely smiled at Maya, a genuine warmth touching her eyes that hadn't been there a moment before. "It's nice to meet you both," she said. Her voice was calm and low. She placed a shoebox on the table. "I hope they're what you were looking for." Leo opened the box and his breath caught. The boots were perfect, even better than the pictures the DIAPL. Leather was soft. The stitching was flawless. They smelled new. He ran his thumb over the tread and felt a wave of relief, so strong it almost buckled his knees. "They're perfect," he said, his voice thick, with an emotion he couldn't hide. "Thank you." He reached for his wallet, but as he did, Julie, who had turned to order a coffee, stumbled slightly, catching her heel on the leg of a nearby Ryan chair. Her purse slipped from her shoulder, spilling its contents across the floor. A phone, a set of keys, a lipstick, and a slim leather wallet skittered under the table. Leo reacted without thinking. "I've got it," he said, crouching down and gathering her things before anyone else had a chance to notice. He handed everything back to her, his hand brushing hers for a brief second. He didn't think anything of it. Not then. The transaction was quick and quiet. Leo handed over the $20 bill, and Julie slipped it into her pocket without looking at it. A gesture so casual, it made him feel the weight of that money even more acutely. She bought Maya a hot chocolate, insisting it was on her, and for a few minutes they sat in a comfortable silence, Maya sipping her drink with a blissful expression, and Leo just trying to memorize the feeling of having done something right for his daughter when they stood. To leave, Julie gave them another one of her small, contained smiles. "I hope your daughter enjoys the boots," she said. "I'm sure she will," Leo replied. "Thanks again for meeting me." He and Maya turned and walked out of the coffee shop, the little bell above the door chiming their departure as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Maya squeezed his hand. "She was nice, Daddy." "Yeah," Leo said, looking down at the shoebox in his other hand. "She was." He didn't think he'd ever see her again. Just another fleeting, anonymous connection in a city full of them. He had no idea that, as he walked away, Julie was still watching him from the window, her coffee untouched, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup, and a thoughtful, unreadable expression on her face. The wallet he'd handed back to her was sitting on the table beside her. And she was no longer thinking about the $20 he'd given her. She was thinking about the fact that he hadn't hesitated to help a stranger without expecting anything in return. Juliana Vance sat in the back of her chauffeured sedan, the city lights blurring into long streaks of gold and red through the tinted windows. The shoebox was gone, the $20 tucked away in a pocket she'd probably forget about, but the feeling of the encounter lingered like the scent of coffee on her coat. She wasn't Julia 7. She was Juliana Vance, the sole heiress to a sprawling tech empire, a name that opened doors and silenced rooms. A woman whose life was a carefully curated collection of girded board meetings, charity galas, and investments that multiplied while she slept. She was also profoundly lonely. Her daughter, Amelia, the original owner of the boots, was away at a prestigious boarding school in Switzerland, a decision Juliana now regretted with a quiet, constant ache. Amelia hadn't wanted to go, but it had seemed like the right thing at the time. The safest thing after the divorce, after her ex-husband's very public betrayal, had turned their lives into tabloid fodder, selling her daughter's outgrown things. Online had been a strange impulse, an attempt to connect with something real, something anonymous. She'd created the fake profile Julie7 and listed a few items with prices that were little more than symbolic gestures. It wasn't about the money. It was about feeling like a normal person for an hour. A mom getting rid of old clothes, not a CEO liquidating assets. She hadn't expected to meet someone like Leo. His hands were callous, the nails, short and clean but stained with something dark, ink or paint. The working man's hands. His coat was worn at the elbows. His eyes were kind but tired, carrying a weight she recognized not of responsibility but of love. And when he'd returned her wallet, which held more cash than he probably saw in a month, and several high-limit credit cards he hadn't even glanced inside, he'd just handed it back with a simple, "Here you go," and a plash and sev. Focus on getting back to his daughter. That kind of integrity was a foreign currency in her world, in her life. People didn't return wallets without a motive. They didn't offer help without an angle. Leo had done it because it was the right thing to do, and that simple fact had unsettled something deep within her. She leaned her head against the cool glass of the window. The car, humming. Silently beneath her, she thought of the way his daughter's eyes had lit up over a simple cup of hot chocolate, a small joy so pure, it felt like a revelation. Her own daughter was surrounded by luxury. But Juliana couldn't remember the last time she'd seen that kind of unadulterated happiness on her face. The car pulled up to her sprawling minimalist mansion, a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the city. It was beautiful, sterile, and empty. She stepped out into the cold night air and looked up at the sky, but there were no stars visible, just the dull, orange glow of light pollution. She missed the stars, she thought, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the sharp pang of wanting to be somewhere else, somewhere real, somewhere a man with kind eyes and a $20 bill. Tu was tucking his daughter into bed with a new pair of boots, waiting for her by the door. The library was quiet. The next morning, the only sounds, the soft rustle of turning pages and the distant hum of the city outside Leo, was in the back inn. The restoration room, a small space that smelled of leather and old glue. His hands moved with a practiced grace that belied their rough appearance. He was carefully mending the spine of a first-edition poetry book, a delicate surgery that required patience and a steady touch. Maya was sitting at a small table nearby, coloring a picture of a tree. With a face and arms, she was wearing the new boots, her legs swinging happily as she worked. She hadn't taken them off since she'd woken up this morning, even wearing them with her pajamas at breakfast. Leo smiled to himself. It was a good day, a quiet day, the kind he cherished. The bell at the front desk chimed softly, and Leo glanced up through the glass partition of his workshop. He expected to see one of the usual patrons, an elderly woman, returning a stack of mysteries, or a college student, looking for a quiet place to study, but it was her Julie, stood at the circulation desk, looking even more out of place among the towering shelves of books than she had in the coffee shop. She wore a simple gray cashmere sweater and dark pants, but the quiet elegance of her clothes seemed to vibrate in the dusty air. Leo wiped his hands on his apron and stepped out of the workshop, his heart giving a strange, unexpected lurch. "Julie," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "What are you doing here?" She turned and offered a small, hesitant smile. "I hope this isn't a bad time. I think I left something in the shoebox yesterday." She held up a small object, a silver bookmark shaped like a feather. "My daughter's. She'd be heartbroken if she lost it. I just wanted to return it. Leo's brow furrowed. He hadn't noticed it, but he nodded. Oh, of course. Thank you. I didn't even see it. It's no trouble, she said, her gaze drifting around the library. This place is amazing. It's old, Leo said with a shrug. And always in need of repairs, but it's home. Just then, Maya looked up from her coloring. It's the shoe lady, she exclaimed, hopping off her stool and running over her new boots, thudding softly on the floor. Juliana's face broke into a genuine smile as she knelt to meet Maya's level. Hi again, explorer. You're wearing the boots. Maya beamed. They're my favorite. They've already been to a magic forest this morning. She held up her drawing for inspection. See? Juliana took the drawing and studied it with a seriousness that made Leo's chest ache. That is a very impressive forest, she said. I love the talking squirrel in the corner, Maya giggled. That's Sir Reginald. He's the king. For the next 10 minutes, Juliana and Maya were lost in their own world talking about crayon colors. And the proper way to address squirrel royalty, Leo leaned against a bookshelf and watched them, the cautious part of his brain. The part that had been hurt too many times was screaming at him that this woman was from a world he couldn't touch, that her kindness was a fleeting curiosity, but the other part of him, the part that hadn't felt this light in years, just watched as the sun streamed through the old library windows, illuminating the dust motes, dancing around. A woman with a silver bookmark and a smile that finally reached her eyes. The silver bookmark lay on the counter, a silent testament to the lie. Juliana had told to get here. She hadn't left it in the box. She'd tucked it into her pocket. Before leaving her house this morning, a flimsy excuse to see him again, to see if the quiet integrity she'd witnessed was real or just a fluke. She watched as Leo guided Maya back to her coloring table, his voice low and dashly. Gentle, his hand resting for a moment on his daughter's head. It was a simple gesture, but it was full of a love, so palpable it made Juliana's throat tighten. She had teams of people to manage her life staff to run her house, but she couldn't remember the last time someone had touched her with that kind of uncomplicated affection. Leo walked back to the counter, his expression a mixture of curiosity and caution. So, he said, leaning against the worn wood, you just happened to be in this neighborhood? Juliana felt a blush creep up her neck. I was visiting a gallery nearby. She lied again, the untruths slipping out more easily than she would have liked. She hated it, but the truth felt too complicated, too heavy for this quiet, dusty place. I love old books, she added quickly, trying to steer the conversation to safer ground. This place feels like a sanctuary. Leo's expression softened. It is for me too. I started volunteering here after my wife passed away. It was the only place that felt quiet enough for my thoughts. The mention of his wife hung in the air between them, a small piece of his story offered up so openly. It surprised her. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He gave a sad half-smile. It was a long time ago, but some days it feels like yesterday. She loved this place. She used to say that books were proof that humans were capable of magic. Juliana looked around at the towering shelves, at the hushed reverence of the space. She was right. Maya called out from her table. Daddy, I'm hungry. Leo glanced at the clock. A flicker of something she couldn't name crossed his face. Was it worry? Panic? He quickly masked it with a smile. Okay, kiddo, lunchtime. He turned to Juliana. Well, I should probably get back to work. It was nice of you to stop by. He was dismissing her politely but firmly, and she understood he was a man with a careful routine, a life built around the edges of what he could control, and she was an anomaly, an unexpected variable he didn't know how to place. But as she turned to leave, he said, Wait. She paused, her hand on the heavy wooden door. Do you like grilled cheese? He asked the question so unexpected it made her blink. I was going to make some for Maya in the staff kitchen. It's not fancy, but I love grilled cheese, she said, cutting him off a little too quickly. And the lie felt less like a lie and more like a wish. She desperately wanted to be true for the first time in what felt like a lifetime someone was offering her, not a 5-course meal at a Michelin-starred restaurant, but a simple sandwich made in a staff kitchen, and it felt more valuable than anything on a menu. The staff kitchen was a small, cramped room in the library's basement with a humming refrigerator, a microwave from the last century, and a single hot plate that sat on a formica countertop with a burn mark in the corner. The air smelled faintly of burnt toast and old coffee. It was the complete opposite of Juliana's own kitchen, a vast expanse of stainless steel and marble, where a private chef prepared meals. She often ate alone. Leo moved with an easy familiarity in the small space, pulling a loaf of bread and a package of sliced cheese from the fridge. Worked with a quiet efficiency that she found captivating his hands, which were so gentle with the fragile books. Upstairs were just as steady as he buttered the bread and laid it on the hot plate. Maya sat at a wobbly little table, humming to herself and kicking her new boots. Against the table leg, Juliana leaned against the doorframe, feeling like an intruder in this small domestic scene. "So you're a book doctor?" she asked, trying to keep the conversation. Light Leo flipped a sandwich with a spatula. "Something like that, book restorer. Mostly people bring me things that are falling apart, family Bibles, old photo albums, first editions, and I try to put them back together. You fix broken things," she said more to herself than to him. He glanced at her, a small smile playing on his lips. "I try." The sandwiches were simple and perfect golden brown on the outside, with cheese melted into a gooey river in the middle. He served them on mismatched plates, with a handful of baby carrots on the side. Juliana sat across from Maya and took a bite. The bread was crunchy, the cheese was salty, and it was the most delicious thing she'd eaten in months. They ate in a comfortable silence punctuated by Maya's occasional questions about whether dragons liked grilled cheese. Leo watched Juliana carefully as if he was still trying to figure her out. She ate with a strange mix of elegance and hunger, like someone who had forgotten how good simple food could taste when the meal was over. He took their plates to the small sink and began to wash them by hand. "You don't have to do that," she said, standing. "It's my turn." He turned surprised and handed her a dish towel. Their fingers brushed, and a jolt of something warm and unexpected passed between them. They stood side by side at the W aisle. Sink, washing and drying, the few dishes in a quiet rhythm that felt both strange and deeply familiar. It was the most ordinary thing in the world. A man and a woman washing dishes after lunch. But for Juliana, it felt extraordinary. It felt real. It felt like a memory she was making. Instead of one, she was trying to forget the afternoon sun, slanted through the grimy basement window, casting long shadows on the floor. Maya had fallen asleep in a big armchair in the corner of the wood staff room, her head pillowed on her arm, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Leo had draped his coat over her like a blanket. The quiet of the library had seeped downstairs, wrapping them in a peaceful hush. Juliana and Leo stood near the sink. The last dish, dried and put away, the silence between them was no longer awkward. It was full of unspoken things. A shared meal, a sleeping child, a connection that neither of them had expected. Leo leaned against the counter, his arms crossed over his chest, his gaze fixed on his daughter. "She does that when she feels safe," he said, his voice low. "Just crashes wherever she lands." Juliana smiled softly. "She's a sweet kid. You're doing a great job with her." Leo let out a breath that sounded like it carried the spallen weight of years. "I worry I'm not enough for her, that I can't give her the things she deserves." "She has you," Juliana said quietly. "I think that's all she wants." He finally looked at her, his eyes searching her face. "You're not just some gallery goer with a lost bookmark, are you?" The question was direct, not accusatory, just a quiet demand for the truth. Juliana's heart skipped a beat. She had rehearsed this moment in her head a dozen times, but now that it was here, the words caught in her throat. "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I'm not." He waited, letting her find her courage. "My life is." She struggled for the right word. "Complicated. I own a company, a tech firm. It's demanding, and it's left me feeling pretty empty lately. I needed to get away from it for a while, to remember what it felt like to just be a person, not a title." Leo nodded slowly. Processing her words, he didn't ask the name of the company. He didn't ask how much she was worth. He just listened. "And the shoes?" he asked. "They belong to my daughter." "Juliana," said, a pang of sadness in her voice. "She's at a boarding school overseas. I was just cleaning out her closet, and I don't know it felt less lonely to sell them to someone who would love them than to just give them away to a stranger." "So you're not Juliana," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. She shook her head. "I'm Juliana." "Well, Juliana," he said, stepping a little closer, "I'm glad you came to the library." "Me too, Leo," she whispered. And in the quiet of that basement, with the scent of old books and burnt toast hanging in the air, something shifted, something fragile and hopeful began to take root between them, and for the first time in a very long time, both of them felt a little less alone. Juliana left the library that day with a feeling she couldn't quite name. It was a mixture of lightness and terror, a sense of having found something precious, and the paralyzing fear of breaking it. She'd given him a piece of the truth, but not all of it. She'd told him she owned a company. She hadn't told him it was Vance Technologies, one of the largest and most influential tech firms in the world, a name that was synonymous with innovation, power, and ruthless competition. She hadn't told him that her face had been on the cover of Forbes, or that her net worth was a number with too many zeros to feel real. She had simply been Juliana, a woman with a complicated life, and for a few hours that had been enough back in her sterile mansion, she wandered through the silent rooms, the echo of her footsteps on the marble floors, the only sound, the grilled cheese sandwich she'd eaten, sat in her stomach, a warm and pleasant memory, a stark contrast to the cold, professionally prepared salad. Waiting for her in the fridge, she found herself standing in her daughter Amelia's room, a space that was perfectly preserved, like a museum exhibit. The bed was made with pristine white linens. The books on the shelves were arranged by color. A collection of expensive dolls sat untouched on a window seat. It was a beautiful room for a girl who wasn't there. Juliana picked up a framed photo from the nightstand, a picture of her and Amelia at a charity event. A year ago, they were both smiling for the cameras, but their eyes were distant, their smiles practiced. It had been one of the last times they'd been photographed together before the divorce, before everything fell apart. She thought of Leo and Maya. In the library, their world was small, cramped, and probably a constant struggle, but it was real. Their love wasn't a performance. It was a quiet, steady hum that filled the space between them. Juliana had spent her life building an empire, acquiring things, creating a legacy. But she had failed to build the one thing that truly mattered: a home. She sat on the edge of her daughter's bed, and for the first time in months she let herself cry. Not for the life she had, but for the one she had missed. The next few days passed in a strange, dreamlike state. For Leo, he went about his routine at the library, mending books, helping patrons, making lunch for Maya. But everything felt different. The memory of Juliana's presence lingered in the basement kitchen, the scent of her perfume, a faint whisper in the cease air. He found himself glancing at the door every time the bell chimed, hoping to see her standing there. But she didn't come, he told himself. It was for the best. She was from another world, a world of tech firms and complicated lives. Was a bookbinder in a dusty library, a man whose greatest treasure was a little girl with a wild imagination. Their paths had crossed by chance, a brief, beautiful collision, but they were never meant to run parallel. He tried to push her from his mind, but it was no use. He'd see a woman with dark hair pulled into a knot, and his heart would leap. He'd hear a soft laugh from the children's section, and he'd turn expecting to see her kneeling by the picture books. Maya seemed to feel her absence too. She was quieter than usual. "Is the shoe lady coming back?" she asked one afternoon, her voice. Small Leo's chest tightened. "I don't know, sweetheart, maybe." He hated the uncertainty in his own voice. He hated that he'd let this woman, this beautiful, enigmatic stranger, crack open a door in his carefully guarded heart that he didn't know how to close on Friday afternoon as he was closing up the library. He saw her car, a sleek black sedan, pull up to the curb outside his heart, hammered against his ribs. He wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans and walked to the door. She stepped out of the car holding a small paper bag. She looked nervous, her smile hesitant. "Hi," she said. "I brought you something." It was a book, a beautiful leather-bound edition of Maya's favorite dragon story. "I had it specially bound," she said. "I thought she might like it." Leo took the book, his fingers brushing hers. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," she said, her eyes pleading with him to understand. "Leo, can we talk?" He hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let her in. He knew in that moment that whatever happened next, he couldn't go back to the quiet safety of his old life. Not anymore. She had already changed it too much. Juliana followed Leo into the quiet sanctuary of the library. After hours, the setting sun cast long, dramatic shadows through the tall windows, painting the rows of books in strokes of orange and purple. The air was still and heavy with the scent of paper and time. A silence that felt both sacred and intimidating. She watched as he ran a hand over the spine of the book. She'd brought his touch gentle and reverent. "This is incredible," he said, his voice low. "Maya will treasure this." I hoped she would. Juliana replied, her hands clenched in the pockets of her coat. "Leo, I haven't been entirely honest with you." He looked up, his expression unreadable. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath. The truth felt like a stone in her throat. "The company I own, it's called Vance Technologies." She saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, and her stomach tightened. "I've seen the name on the news," he said quietly. "You're not just a business owner. You're a public figure." She finished for him. "Yes, and I hate it. I hate the constant scrutiny, the expectations, the way people look at me like I'm a brand, not a person. I came here to this city, to this library, because I was trying to escape that too. Feel like myself again. And I didn't tell you because I was afraid that if you knew you would look at me that way too." Leo didn't speak for a long moment. He just studied her, his gaze intense and searching. She could feel her carefully constructed composure begin to crumble under his silence. "I understand if this changes things," she whispered. "I understand if you don't want me in your life or Maya's." "Does it change things?" he finally said, his voice soft. "Of course it does. It's insane. It's like a movie. But does it change how I feel when I'm with you?" He shook his head slowly. "No, it doesn't change that at all." A wave of relief washed over her, so powerful it made her dizzy. "But I need to know one thing," he said, stepping closer. "Are you here because you're running from your life? Or are you here because you want to be part of ours?" The question hung in the air between them, the most important question anyone had ever asked her. She met his gaze, her eyes clear and unwavering. "I'm not running anymore, Leo," she said. "I'm here because for the first time, in a very long time, I feel like I'm home." He searched her face for another moment, then he closed the distance between them and kissed her. It was a kiss that was both tentative and sure, a question and an answer, a beginning and an end. To all the loneliness they had both carried for so long, and in the golden light of the setting sun, surrounded by the silent stories of 1,000 books, they began to write their own. Their new reality was a strange and delicate dance, a careful weaving of two vastly different worlds. Juliana didn't abandon her life, but she began to reshape it. She started working remotely from a small, unassuming office. She rented downtown delegating more of the day-to-day operations of her company to her trusted second-in-command. She traded her chauffeured sedan for a modest electric car that she drove herself, often getting lost in the city's winding streets. She still had board meetings and conference calls, but they were now punctuation marks in a life that was increasingly filled with library visits, park picnics, and the art of making the perfect grilled cheese. Leo's world expanded too, but in quieter ways. He started to let Juliana in, not just into his home, but into his worries. He let her help with the bills, not by writing a check, but by helping him budget and find small ways to cut costs. He let her see the vulnerability he had guarded so fiercely, the fear that kept him up at night that he wasn't a good enough father for Maya. Their time together was a study. In contrasts, one afternoon, they would be sitting on the floor of the library basement surrounded by piles of dusty books, Leo patiently teaching Juliana how to stitch a torn page, and the next they would be at a quiet, upscale restaurant, a place Juliana had chosen where the waiters knew her name. And the wine list was thicker than a novel. Leo felt out of place at first, but Juliana's easy confidence and the way she held his hand under the table made him feel like he belonged anywhere as long as he was with her. Maya was the bridge that connected their two worlds. She was equally at home in the dusty corners of the library and the manicured gardens of Juliana's mansion. She saw no difference between them. She just saw two people she loved, who loved her back. One evening, as they were tucking Maya into bed, she looked up at them with her wide, serious eyes. "Are you two going to get married?" she asked, matter-of-factly. Leo and Juliana exchanged a surprised glance. "Well," Leo said, stumbling for an answer, "we haven't really talked about that." "You should," Maya said with a yawn. "Then Julie could be my mom for real." The innocent words hung in the air long after Maya had drifted off to sleep that night as they sat on the small balcony of Leo's apartment looking out at the city lights. Juliana turned to him, her expression soft and serious. "What if she's right?" she asked. "What if we did?" Leo's heart pounded in his chest. He had never imagined a future that included marriage again. But with Juliana, it didn't feel like a betrayal of his past. It felt like a continuation of his love. "Are you asking me to marry you, Juliana Vance?" he asked, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I'm asking you to think about it," she said, her eyes shining. "I'm asking you to consider a future where we fix broken things together." And as he looked at her, at this incredible woman who had walked into his life and turned it upside down in the most beautiful way he knew, he didn't need to think about it at all. His answer was all ready. Yes, the article appeared on a Monday morning on the front page of the city's most influential business journal. The headline was bold and unforgiving: Vance Technologies CEO in shocking romance with local librarian. The story was accompanied by a grainy paparazzi photo of Leo and Juliana walking hand in hand out of a small neighborhood restaurant, their faces illuminated by the camera's flash. The article was a thinly veiled attack, a mixture of shock and condescension, questioning Juliana's judgment and painting Leo as an opportunistic gold digger. It hinted that her recent disengagement from the company was due to this distraction and that the board was concerned. Juliana saw it first. Her assistant sent it to her with a one-word message: "Trouble." She read it with a growing sense of dread, not for herself, but for Leo. She knew how much his pride and his privacy meant to him, and this article had just shattered both in the most public way possible. She drove to the library, her hands tight on the steering wheel. She found him in the restoration room, his back to the door, his shoulders slumped. He was holding a copy of the newspaper, his knuckles white. "Leo," she said softly. He didn't turn around. "They make me sound like a joke," he said, his voice flat. "Like I'm some kind of charity case you picked up." "That's not true, and you know it," she said, stepping closer. "This is what they do. They twist things. They create a narrative that serves them. It doesn't matter what's true," he said, finally turning to face her. His eyes were full of pain and anger. It matters what people believe, and they're going to believe this. We can fight it, she said, her voice firm. We can issue a statement. We can't. We can't, he interrupted. This is your world, Juliana, not mine. I can't live like this. I can't have my daughter's life turned into a headline because her father fell in love with a billionaire. The word billionaire hung in the air. Between them, a stark reminder of the chasm that separated their lives. I don't want to be a part of this story, he said, his voice breaking. And I don't want Maya to be either. What are you saying? She whispered, her heart sinking. I'm saying maybe this was a mistake. He said the words, tearing him apart. Maybe our worlds are too different. Maybe we were never meant to be more than a nice story. He couldn't look at her as he said it. He just stared at the floor, at the cracks in the linoleum that suddenly felt as wide and deep as the gulf between them, and Juliana stood there, her heart shattering into a million pieces as the man she loved built a wall between them, brick by painful brick. He was pushing her away, not because he didn't love her, but because he loved his daughter more. And in that moment, she had no idea how to tear that wall down. The days that followed were a quiet kind of hell, a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. Leo threw himself into his work at the library, arriving early, staying late, mending books with a frantic energy that left his fingers raw and his mind blessedly numb. He avoided the news. He didn't answer his phone when unfamiliar numbers called. He tried to build a fortress of routine around himself and Maya, a return to the simple life they had before Juliana. But it was a fragile fortress, full of cracks and ghosts. Her presence lingered everywhere, in the smell of grilled cheese from the staff kitchen, in the beautiful leather-bound book that now sat on Maya's nightstand in the way. Maya would fall quiet in the middle of a story and ask, "Do you think Julie is sad?" Leo didn't know how to answer that question. He was sad. He was a hollowed-out version of himself, a man walking through the motions of a life that had lost its color. He had pushed Juliana away to protect his daughter, but he had ended up hurting them all. He had been so afraid of her world that he had destroyed his own Juliana. Meanwhile, retreated into the cold, familiar embrace of her corporate life. She returned to the Vance Technologies headquarters, a ghost. In a power suit, she attended board meetings, her face an unreadable mask, her voice calm and measured. She stared at spreadsheets and listened to presentations about market shares and profit margins, but her mind was elsewhere. It was in a dusty library basement, with a man who smelled like old paper and a little girl who drew pictures of talking squirrels. She had thought that by leaving, she could give him back his peace, but all she had done was amplify her own loneliness. One evening, she found herself standing in front of the coffee shop where they had first met. She looked through the window at the table where they had sat, and a wave of regret, so powerful it stole her breath, washed over her. She had spent her entire life being strong, being in control, being the one who made the tough decisions, but in this moment she felt nothing but helpless. She had let him push her away. She had let his fear win. And now they were both paying the price. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over his name. She could call him. She could fight for him. But what if he was right? What if their love was destined to be a casualty of their different worlds? The thought was a cold, sharp pain in her chest. And for the first time in her life, Juliana Vance had no idea what to do next. The library fundraiser was an annual event, a small community affair with homemade cookies, a silent auction for donated art, and the hopeful goal of raising enough money to fix the leaky roof in the children's section. Leo had always loved the event, the way the community came together to support the place that meant so much to him, but this year he dreaded it. It felt like a reminder of everything. He had lost a place where Juliana's absence would be a palpable presence. Maya, however, was thrilled she had been chosen to read a short story she had written for the event, a great honor for a second grader she practiced for days. Her voice clear and proud as she read about a sad king who lived in a castle made of books. He had a daughter who loved him very much. But the king was lonely, because he had sent away the Sun Queen, who made his castle feel warm. He was afraid her light was too bright, and would burn his precious books. Leo listened to her story, his heart aching with the truth. He couldn't escape. He was the sad king, and he had sent away his Sun Queen the night of the fundraiser. The library was filled with the warm buzz of conversation and the smell of fresh coffee. Leo stood in the back, trying to make himself invisible. He watched Maya as she stood on the small makeshift stage, her new boots peeking out from under her dress. Her voice was a little shaky at first, but then she found her rhythm, her story filling the quiet room. He saw the way the Rhydon. Other parents smiled the way they were moved by her simple tale of love and loss. And in that moment a fierce wave of pride and shame washed over him. He was so proud of his daughter, and so ashamed of the man he had become when Maya finished her story. The room erupted in applause. She took a small bow, and then she did something unexpected. She looked out at the crowd and said, "This story is for my dad and for Julie, because I miss her, and I think he does too." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Leo. He felt his face flush, a mixture of embarrassment and a strange sort of relief. It was as if his daughter had just spoken the truth. He had been too afraid to admit to himself just then. The library doors opened, and a woman slipped into the back of the room. It was Juliana. She was dressed simply in a dark coat, her hair pulled back her face, pale but determined. She had heard about the fundraiser, and she couldn't stay away. She had to see him. She had to see Maya. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and in that one look, everything fell away. The headlines, the fear, the different worlds. There was only the undeniable pull that had been there from the beginning, the feeling of two halves of a whole, finally finding each other again. And as Maya ran from the stage and into Juliana's waiting arms, Leo knew he couldn't fight it anymore. He had been so busy trying to protect his past that he had almost lost his future. He walked toward them, his steps slow and steady. And when he reached them, he didn't say a word. He just pulled them both into his arms, a silent promise that he would never let them go again. Juliana and Leo stood. In the quiet aftermath of the fundraiser, the last of the guests having drifted home, leaving behind the scent of coffee and the lingering warmth of community, Maya was asleep on a pile of coats in the office, her face peaceful, her chest rising and falling. In a steady rhythm, the library was their sanctuary, a silent witness to their reunion. Leo ran a hand through his hair, his gaze never leaving Juliana's face. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was a coward. I let my fear get the best of me. I pushed you away when all I wanted to do was pull you closer. I understand," she said, her voice soft. "I was scared too. I've spent my whole life being let down by people I trusted. I didn't know how to fight for something. I was afraid of losing. I love you, Juliana." He said the words, a release, a confession, a prayer. "Not because of who you are or what you have, but because of who I am. When I'm with you, you make me better. You make me braver. And I love you, Leo," she replied, her eyes filling with tears. "You and Maya, you are the most real thing in my life. You are my home." They stood in the center of the library, surrounded by the silent stories of 1,000 lives, and in that moment, they knew their own story was just beginning. They would face challenges. They would have to navigate the treacherous waters of their different worlds. But they would do it together. Their love, a lighthouse in the storm, a week later. Juliana called a press conference. The boardroom, Advanced Technologies, was packed with reporters and photographers, their cameras flashing like 1,000 tiny lightning bolts. The board members sat behind her, their faces a mixture of anxiety and curiosity. Juliana stood at the podium, calm and composed, but there was a new strength in her eyes, a fire that had been missing for too long. She didn't read from a prepared statement, she spoke from the heart. She announced that she was restructuring the company, creating a new foundation dedicated to funding literacy programs and restoring public libraries across the country. She spoke of the importance of community, of human connection, of the things that couldn't be measured in profit margins. And then she looked directly into the cameras and said, "And for those of you who are so curious about my personal life, let me be clear. I am in love with a man named Leo. He is a bookbinder, a father, and the kindest, most honorable man I have ever known. He is my partner and my future, and if anyone in this room or in this company has a problem with that, they can consider this their 2 weeks' notice." The room was stunned into silence, then a slow wave of applause started building, a genuine expression of respect for the woman who had finally found her voice, her purpose, her truth. As the press conference ended, Juliana felt a sense of peace. She had never known she was no longer a prisoner of her name or her wealth. That was the architect of her own life, a life that was filled with love, purpose, and the quiet joy of a story. Just beginning, the wedding was a small private affair, held in the children's section of the library. The leaky roof had been fixed, thanks to an anonymous donation, and the shelves were decorated with strings of fairy lights and white roses. Maya was the flower girl, her boots replaced with a pair of shiny new shoes, her smile radiant as she walked down the aisle, scattering rose petals on the faded linoleum floor. Leo stood at the front, his heart so full he thought it might burst. He watched as Juliana walked toward him, her dress simple and elegant, her eyes shining with a love that felt as old and as timeless as the books that surrounded them. They exchanged vows. They had written themselves promises of love, support, and a lifetime of grilled cheese sandwiches and shared stories. When they kissed, the small crowd of friends and family erupted in cheers. And in that moment, surrounded by the magic of books and the warmth of their loved ones, Leo and Juliana knew they had finally found their happily ever after. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something much better. It was a real one. Their life together was a beautiful, chaotic, messy masterpiece. They bought a house in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, not too far from the library, a house with a big backyard for Maya to play in and a small workshop for Leo to restore his books. Juliana continued to run her company, but on her own terms. She traveled less, she delegated more, and she made sure to be home every night for dinner. She became a regular volunteer at the library, leading story time for the kids, and helping Leo with the restoration work. Their home was filled with laughter, the smell of old books, and the constant presence of love. It was a place where a billionaire CEO could kick off her heels and read a bedtime story, and a humble bookbinder could feel like the richest man in the world. One sunny afternoon, as they sat in the backyard watching Maya chase butterflies, Juliana turned to Leo, her expression soft and contemplative. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "Your quiet life before I came and turned it all upside down?" Leo smiled and took her hand. "My life wasn't quiet," he said. "It was silent. And you brought the music." He leaned in and kissed her. A slow, sweet kiss that tasted of sunshine and forever. And as they sat there, holding hands in the golden afternoon light, they knew they had everything they had ever wanted. They had each other, they had Maya, and they had a love story that was more beautiful and more magical than any they could ever find in a book. It was a story they had written themselves, a story of two different worlds, colliding and creating something new, something better, something real. And they knew that their story was far from over. It was just getting started, and the best chapters were yet to come. The years passed like the turning of pages in a well-loved book, each one bringing new joys, new challenges, and a deepening of the love that had taken root in the dusty quiet of the old library. Maya grew from a girl into a young woman, her love of stories leading her to become a writer herself. Her first published book, a fantasy novel about a dragon-riding princess, was dedicated to "My parents, who taught me that the greatest magic is found in the courage to love." Leo's restoration business flourished. He opened a small shop downtown where he taught classes on bookbinding, his hands still stained with ink and glue, his heart still full of a quiet contentment he had never thought possible. Juliana transformed Vance Technologies from a faceless corporate giant into a company with a conscience. Her foundation built libraries in underserved communities, funded scholarships for aspiring writers and artists, and proved that success didn't have to come at the cost of soul. One crisp autumn evening, Leo and Juliana found themselves back at the library. It was the 10th anniversary of the fundraiser, where they had found their way back to each other. The library was a different place now. The leaky roof, a distant memory, the shelves full of new books, the children's section, a vibrant, colorful space named the Maya Wing. They stood in the back of the room watching the new generation of kids and parents. Enjoying the space they had helped create an old familiar feeling of gratitude and love washed over them. "We did good," Leo set his arm around her waist. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We did." A young girl with bright, curious eyes and a pair of sturdy-looking boots ran up to them. "Are you the Book King and the Sun?" "Queen? She?" asked her voice full of awe. Maya's story had become a local legend, a tale passed down to every new child who entered the library. Juliana smiled and knelt down to the girl's level. "We're just Leo and Juliana," she said, "but we believe in magic." The little girl's eyes widened. "Me too." As she ran off to join her friends, Leo and Juliana looked at each other, their smiles reflecting a decade of shared memories and a lifetime of love to come. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was a testament to the fact that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the most ordinary of things. A pair of used shoes, a grilled cheese sandwich. A quiet act of kindness in a world that had forgotten how to be kind. Their love was a reminder that home isn't a place, it's a person, and that the best stories are the ones we write together, one messy, beautiful chapter at a time. Their legacy wasn't in the buildings they built or the money they made, it was in the lives they touched, the stories they saved, and the love they shared, a love that was as enduring and as beautiful as the live, timeless tales that lined the shelves of their beloved library. A love that would continue to inspire and enchant for generations to come. A love that was quite simply real. The old city library stood as a beacon in the heart of the community, its warm light spilling out onto the streets, a testament to the enduring power of stories and the people who cherished them inside the Maya Wing. A new generation of readers discovered the magic of books, their laughter echoing through the halls, a sweet symphony of joy and wonder. And in a quiet corner, a framed picture hung on the wall, a grainy photo of a man and a woman walking hand in hand out of a small neighborhood restaurant, their faces illuminated by a camera's flash. A moment that had once been a source of pain and conflict was now a symbol of their love's triumph. A reminder that even the darkest of moments can lead to the brightest of futures. Leo and Juliana often visited the library, sitting in their usual spot in the children's section, watching the world go by. They were older now, their hair streaked with silver, their faces etched with the gentle lines of a life well lived, but their love was as strong and as vibrant as ever, a quiet, steady flame that had warmed them through the years. They had built a life that was rich in a way that had nothing to do with money or status. It was a life filled with the simple pleasures of a shared meal, a walk in the park, a quiet evening. Spent reading side by side, they had taught their daughter and their community that the greatest wealth is found in the connections we make, the kindness we show, and the love we give. And so, their story lived on, not just in the pages of books, but in the hearts of everyone who knew them. A timeless tale of two souls from different worlds who found in each other a love that was strong enough to bridge any divide, a love that was a testament to the extraordinary power of an ordinary life, lived with extraordinary grace and courage. A love that was and would always be an inspiration, a legacy, a home, a quiet masterpiece written in the language of the heart, a story that proved beyond a doubt that the most beautiful happily ever afters are the ones that are messy, real, and fought for, with every fiber of one's being, a story that would be told and retold for years to come, a whisper of hope in a world that so often felt hopeless, a gentle reminder that love in its purest form is the greatest story of all. The sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the library. The lights inside flickered on one by one, illuminating the faces of the children and their parents. A new story time was about to begin. Leo and Juliana smiled at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. They had come full circle from a chance encounter in a coffee shop to a lifetime of shared love. Their journey had been a long and winding one, filled with obstacles and uncertainties, but they had navigated it all with courage and grace. Their love, a constant guiding star. They had proven that love knows no boundaries, no class distinctions, no worldly limitations. It is a force of nature, a universal language that speaks to the deepest parts of our souls, a power that can heal wounds, bridge divides, and create a world where anything is possible as the storyteller began a new tale of adventure and magic. Leo and Juliana held hands, their fingers intertwined, a silent symbol of their unbreakable bond. They were no longer two separate individuals from two different worlds. They were one, a single entity, forged in the fires of love and adversity, their story a testament to the transformative power of human connection and the enduring strength of the human spirit. They had found their place in the world, not in the grand mansions or the corporate boardrooms, but in the quiet moments of shared laughter and the gentle touch of a loving hand. They had discovered that true wealth is not measured in dollars and cents, but in the richness of our relationships and the depth of our capacity to love and be loved. Their legacy was not written in stone or etched in gold. It was written in the hearts of the people they had touched, the lives they had changed, and the community they had helped to build. It was a living, breathing legacy, a testament to the power of kindness, compassion, and the unwavering belief in the goodness of humanity. And as they sat in the warm embrace of the library surrounded by the stories they so loved, they knew that their own story was the greatest of them all. A story of love, hope, and redemption. A story that would continue to unfold with each passing day. A story that was as timeless and as beautiful as the stars in the night sky. A story that was quite simply their own.